What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? Well, the overtime isn't mandatory, but most folks stick around after hours most days. Spoilers, the overtime is mandatory. Fantastic. You should know that, if you choose me for this position, I will be declining the optional overtime. I mean, if you're going to walk anyway, it might be funny to call their bluff. I was once part of a group onboarding for a net job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract and everyone, except me, signed immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy attached. Without other pages, there was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the hour drone said, okay, I guess me is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much. After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that hours reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. I was asked to sign a contract that gave the employer full access to my medical records. It was supposedly for drug testing, but worded badly. I signed every other page and got the job. Would been very interesting if they felt like drug testing me, and they weren't able to. When they ask out of nowhere what clients can you bring with you? I interviewed with MetLife Insurance about 20 years ago. They demanded that I provide them with a contact list of no fewer than 100 friends and family. Noped out of that quickly. Last job I worked. Yay. Everyone here is new. But it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back. So bring your own lunch. You'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. Eater. Also was told by my trainer, you want to know the best advice I can give you? Find another job. This was second week in. Was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. Poor guy just sounded broken. Hope he's somewhere else now. This actually happened to me. Interviewer. Do you have any questions for us? Me. What is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer. Job security. LMAO gotta give them props for honesty at that point. He should have just gotten up and opened the door and gestured out. Dude probably about to quit and was like, better save this guy before I dip. A true homie. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything, and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me, and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen, because they didn't even try to hide it. I didn't know it at the time, but you'll be wearing many hats was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. That's a non-profit motto, if I ever heard one. It's also a tech startup motto. And a hat modeling agency motto. If you can see the floor before the interview, you can sometimes get a vibe about the place. I once went to interview for a sales position. Aside from the interviewer being 30 minutes late, it did allow me to sit and observe the situation. I realized pretty quickly this was not going to be the place for me. Very quiet except a handful of people on the phones cold calling. Many reps trying to push for contacts on the other end. Just painful to listen to. And when they'd hang up there wasn't really any interaction with coworkers. Just quiet, and then another call. It all seemed very tense. I noped out of there real quick after the 5 minutes the interview took. Dodged a bullet. I had interviewed for a call center job at another place that's as a complete 180 from that. Yes, it's a call center job, so it is what it is. But there was laughter on the floor. People talking to floor managers. Just a completely different vibe that was more inviting. I had the opposite experience from your first one. Interviewed for a call center. Thinking I'd probably either just not take it at all because I imagined it would be really draining, or just do it for a couple of weeks until I found something better. But then decided to stay because everyone seemed really nice and chill about the whole deal. Still working there and probably gonna stay until I'm done with uni. You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself from the company. This is illegal in most US states. Unknown about outside the US. Wait, really, this happened to me in Ohio. They also said I had to give it back. I didn't, lol. When you are signing all the forms they give you, and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that just sign here and so on. I hate that in any situation, not just jobs. Buying something big like a car and they're like, oh, it's just standard contract stuff. Let me decide if it's standard. You know full well, if I sign this, I've agreed to whatever the FPEEP is written. Company. Standard contract stuff. Don't need to read it, just sign. Also company, when in court, you should have read the contract to know what you were signing. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, oh, she's not here today, in a tone that suggested I should somehow already know that. She said they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable MW, but could come in any time THF. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay, and went on to my other interviews and ending up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello. I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was cancelled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow? I would be livid. Definitely shows a complete disregard for your time. Everyone looks tired. Also, you don't see anyone in your department before working in it other than the boss. Made this mistake a few times. Was the worst jobs. I interviewed for an independent contractor position on a piece rate. It's hard to predict how much you're going to earn on a piece rate. So to attract me, the manager showed me some pay stubs from his guys. I noticed that. One, he could easily cherry pick pay stubs to show his best guys' best weeks. All that tells me is that I'm likely to make less than what he's showing me, at least on average. The pay stubs were obviously designed to be confusing. They were a full page and absolutely covered in data. He wanted me to be impressed by a dollar amount, obviously not accounting for costs which the contractor has to carry, or taxes which the contractor has to deduct and pay, but he took them away before anyone could have deciphered what the pay period, piece rate, number of jobs or KMS was. 3. He showed me other people pay stubs. WTF. Another red flag is that they were desperate to hire because they didn't have enough contractors to deliver the work contracts they'd already sold. I had 2 guys from different offices call me after I'd declined the position who apparently still thought I was considering it. At my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face, with the caption, "I spoke with boss name about it. I guess we are still doing it." That wasn't subtle at all, but I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff, consider changing her mind about anything, or let people do the work they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I've ever had. There's a good saying, people often don't quit jobs, they quit managers. Jobs where the expectations of the position aren't clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities day to day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what, that lead to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position, looks like you won't be able to either. I was once told sometimes the hourly workers go on strike, and they lock us in, to keep the production line running. But management brings us steaks and we have an informal agreement with the unions, so you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. We only want the best of the best. Me. How much are you paying? Minimum wage. Salary. Competitive. Reality. Minimum wage. Salary. Competitive. Reality. Competitive to sweatshops. Employees are either new hires or have been there for 15 years with no in between. There is no room for improvement. It's better to leave for advancement. There are one or two exceptions to this. I've been at companies where you have the 20-year veterans who love what they do and refuse to move up. So you have a young crowd before they move up and an old grizzled veteran crowd. I came in for a job interview at 7:30 p.m. The entire staff was still in the office. Should have known right then that 9 to 5 was not ever going to happen. One day I worked until 2:30 a.m. to finish up a big project, and my boss said to me I could come in an hour later the next morning. Gee, thanks bro. With my public transport/travel time, that gives me a solid 2 hours of sleep instead of just the one. I had to work till 6 a.m. into the next day and slept until 11 a.m. and logged in as soon as I could, and my senior still had the audacity to ask me why I logged in so late. She knew I logged out at 6 a.m. because I sent an email with an update. These guys do not care about your health. I don't regret for a minute about leaving that job. If they seem to relieved that someone actually showed up for the interview. I just had an interview last week where they showed up 30 minutes late because they weren't expecting me to show up after the first 3 hires never came to work. Tried to hire me on spot and wanted me to work a different department than what I applied for. My favorite is there's a lot of people waiting in line to work here. Count yourself lucky. When you ask what do you like about working here, and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live, instead of the actual job. I asked this at one of my first interviews right out of school. My interviewer went, "That's a good question," and was ruminating for a good 2 minutes. She went with, "We get pretty good parking spots," and quickly followed with, "The people are nice." People are nice is actually a good one. Sometimes can be the only real reason that the work doesn't outright suck. When they feel the need to reassure you in the interview that at that company, they work hard, but also play hard. They don't play hard, it's a sweet shop, and they are just trying to convince that it's anything but one. 100% work hard play hard translates to a minimum of 50 hours a week. But you can use our games room, because we totally have one. If they tell you not to discuss pay, I never ever followed this rule. It's important to find a way to broach the subject with your coworkers. If they are of the mind frame that it's impolite to ask someone their pay, then tell them yours and pay very close attention. Do they smile a bit? Do they look disappointed? Try to gauge from that. Because we don't discuss pay has always been a way to hold down wages and nothing else. It's illegal, but unfortunately it occurs anyway. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut my pay offer, I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. I brought up a company's awful Glassdoor reviews, and they got so mad they ended the interview. Well, guess I dodged that bullet. I've done this a few times during interviews. I've gotten the same responses, and it has never been addressed professionally. Even when companies have stellar reviews, I like to ask about their online reviews. It shows me their reactions to stressful situations. I also figure they're looking at everyone's LinkedIn or whatever. So if they judge me by my online presence, I don't see why I can't do that to them. I'm not obligated to work for someone simply because they extended an interview. We don't like clock watchers here. We expect everyone to be committed. Expecting more work for no extra pay. Getting mad at you when you leave at 5, even though your stated work hours end at 5. Well, then you won't mind if I come in at 9:30. You're not watching the clock, after all. They don't like it when you watch the clocks. Their clock watching is only natural, of course. Do as I say, not as I do. I once turned down a job offer because they mentioned that the previous person in the position had quit after a few months, and most of the people I interviewed with seemed stressed out. I did the same. During the interview, they told that in the last 2 years, they had 8 people in the position, for 8 months at most. It was a good offer, and a job I would like, but I cannot believe that 8 people in a row were lazy, not good enough or bad at their job. I didn't accept the job offer. Always ask the interviewer about the last person who worked the position you are interviewing for, how long they worked, and why they left. Their answers can be very telling of the work environment. They dodge questions on pay, meaning they don't pay enough for what they expect of you. The word family in reference to the employees means they want you to work lots of unpaid overtime. Edit. Also forgot. But if they keep talking about the experience you'll gain, that's also code for we know we are going to be underpaying you. You'll get full-time hours, but won't be full-time. We'll do everything in our power to avoid giving you benefits, even though we have you working more than 40 hours in a week. I once worked in a grocery store, under a union, hired for part-time. Consistently, was scheduled 40 HR/week until the 3rd week of the month. Then I worked 39 hours that week. It kept them from giving me benefits. I went into an interview for a low-level admin position, and they made me put my cell phone in a bucket up front, stating no phones are allowed in the back. It reduces productivity. Big nope for me. The ad for the job has been running continuously for 10 years. We work hard, and we play hard. Translation. You will work 60 hours a week. You will be expected to work late nights and early mornings. People will treat this job like their whole life. We'll also underpay you. It may look like a decent salary, but when you back it out to hourly, it's not even remotely competitive with industry standard. But we have kegs and a ping pong table. Also, if everyone that interviews you has been there less than 2 years, it's a sign that they can't retain good employees. When they tell you what I'm paying you stays between you and me. Don't discuss pay with anyone else. Usually means they are trying to pay you less than your coworkers who do the same job and don't want you to know. This happened to my husband. He had been with company for about 2 years and they hired another employee. Told my husband he got a raise and wasn't to tell anyone else. Turns out his raise was equal to new hire pay. I once interviewed for a job wherein the interviewer actually directly told me that the job was extremely stressful and they'd had a slew of new hires quit within a month or 2. The job was at a psychiatric hospital. I thanked her for being honest with me and said that I was not interested. As she was walking me out, she leaned in and said, "You're doing the right thing. Our last hire quit because he said he was having palpitations all the time here and was worried he would have a heart attack." About 3 years later, at another company, I saw one of the women who had interviewed me. She worked in a totally different position in a totally different setting. She said that the other woman who had interviewed me, the one who gave me the warning, actually did suffer a heart attack. She survived, and she stopped working there. I was so thankful she warned me. Most interviewers wouldn't do that. Edit. And in thinking more about that woman, obviously she was very stressed and she was having to cover work for that position that needed to be filled. She could have easily and understandably have gone into survival mode and thought, you know what? Let's just hire her, meaning me, and then at least I will have some relief for a month or two until this one quits too. But she didn't do that. She thought of my welfare, a stranger, over her own interests. And clearly, she was suffering. I would have relocated for that job too. About 150 miles. She was aware of that. Maybe that played into her decision to warn me. Maybe not. Either way, she was an extraordinary person. Do you have a strong personality? Meant everyone else who worked there were raging cunts, so I literally got into massive shouting matches with and quit over within 6 months of having started. The money was good but no tie. Not getting to speak with who your direct manager will be. A game room or ping pong table is advertised as a perk. The blatant overuse of buzzwords about your profession, clearly written by someone with no clue. People seem tired. Had an online interview with a company a few years ago. Was interviewed by the regional manager. Seemed like a normal interview. Halfway through, he let slip that there were 6 other people from his company watching and listening in, but the software was set up so I could not see or hear them. And he actually got a kick out of telling me this. It was like being on a first date with someone and finding out later she had a hidden camera on her and her parents and 6 other family members were watching the whole time. I'm like, yeah. No. Beep that noise. If you ask what the opportunities for promotion are and they don't give you an answer. I was interviewing at a local business that had recently been acquired by a well-known corp. I asked the interviewers a question that I found invaluable. What do you personally find are the most challenging parts of this job? And I watched the light leave their eyes. They both sighed and said it's really busy. And that was all I needed to hear to know that working there would be a nightmare. I emailed afterward to remove myself from consideration, and I'm confident I did the right thing. When they insist the suicide nets are merely a safety precaution. Therefore catching butterflies. When they get the interview time wrong and then gaslight you about it. I've had a couple interviews where that happened and the person told me it was me who made the mistake. I did not feel bad missing the opportunity.